Long time no see. Welcome back to the Vampires lessons. I've just noticed that today it is the 10th lesson. In order to celebrate this rare occasion, I am going to talk about something that has been on my mind for as long as I've been teaching. Which one is actually better for you, TOEFL or the IELTS? So pay attention, students, because today I'm going to share with you valuable information that usually I'm selling online. So, I'm going to do 4 lessons on the comparisons between TOEFL and the IELTS. Today's first lesson will start with reading, and then listening and speaking and writing and so on and so forth. But before we begin, some general ideas about these two tests. You might have heard a lot of rumors about these two, like the IELTS are simpler, or if you go to the United States, you have to take the TOEFL. But there are some misunderstandings here I shall be clarifying during our lessons. So first thing first, both the TOEFL and the IELTS test are English language proficiency. Although you might be encountering a lot of technical stuff like science or ancient art, but remember, these two tests are only testing if you can speak English, can use English, can understand English. So don't mistake these two tests with the usual academic subjects that you might encounter at schools, because they are not. Therefore, if you are trapped inside of thinking of taking these two tests as if you are being tested on scientific subjects or biological subjects, you are mistaken, you are wrong. So just come back, look at the general picture, and then go to the test. So first thing first, reading. The TOEFL reading and the IELTS reading are significantly different in one aspect particularly. That is, in TOEFL, all of the questions are multiple choices. Whereas in the IELTS, you have filling in the blanks, you have true, false, not given. So the testing methods are different, making people believe that these two tests are really different. However, even if they look different on the outset, they are basically the same thing. The reading sections of both the TOEFL and the IELTS are testing if you can summarize the information, see the gist, only the gist of the entire passage, and then they will test on your comprehension of the general directions of things. As if you are studying stuff, reading through a very thick textbook, you are not expected to memorize or even understand every little details during a test. So, at first glance, how much can you get? Now, the subject matter between these two tests. Now, TOEFL's reading is, according to its official guide, is taken directly from the textbook of high school syllabus. That makes TOEFL's reading unique in 2 ways. First, all of the subjects are about things that you might have to study during high school. So I'm afraid that there is nothing new, nothing exciting, nothing really related to what we are doing in the real life now. The subjects may span from paleontology, which is the dinosaurs, archaeology, ancient European trading, that kind of stuff, making TOEFL reading articles extremely boring, which is actually one of the reasons I don't enjoy teaching TOEFL. On the other hand, the IELTS test take its materials from magazines. Therefore, you might find the discussions centering on the topics that are somehow related to us now, like the technology that has been developed for our convenience or for targeting global crisis like the climate change. So, IELTS topics will be feeling very much like you are reading through magazines. You can actually enjoy the test while you are doing the test. You are also gaining new knowledge, expanding your intellectual horizons, so to speak. Now, however, in TOEFL test, because the reading reads like at high school textbooks, and also because most of the questions in TOEFL test are going to pinpoint the paragraphs from which a particular question is generated. Therefore, most of the students would make this mistake of seeing TOEFL as if it is a test about the details, and then the people will just read the questions and the answers, look for the keywords, and then go back to the paragraph, and then choose the wrong answer. Or in the IELTS test, people are going to just read the questions again, pick up the so-called keywords, and go back to the passage, and then they cannot find the answer. Therefore, no matter how tempting it is to use only the keywords to find the answers, remember this: both the TOEFL and the IELTS test demand you, require you, order you to read through the entire thing, get the gist, and then the answers will appear. Of course, the detailed tactics for both these tests differ in significant ways, such as that because in TOEFL the reading passages are shorter, therefore the reading through the whole thing first is comparatively easier. And then, because all of the questions in TOEFLs are multiple choices, therefore if you get the gist of the paragraphs, it is usually enough to get you through the entire test and get a full mark, 30, in reading. Whereas in the IELTS test, because there is this section of true, false, not given, and the not given and the false ones are quite tricky. And so when you are doing the IELTS test, then you have to bear in mind that there are certain questions designed especially for you to not able to get a full mark, which is level 9, because level 9 indicates that you are actually not only a native speaker, but a highly educated native speaker. You must have read a lot. So, the expectation for TOEFL and IELTS differs. And also, because TOEFL's articles are quite repetitive. Like I said, TOEFL only covers several topics all the time. So, if you are a beginner, if your English is not really good, just take the TOEFL through the practices of the TOEFL Practice Online, or the so-called TPO. You can accumulate enough vocabulary to help you go through all of the TOEFL reading passages. Whereas in the IELTS, now, the last thing I'm going to talk about in this lesson is, so why would a lot of people say that, oh come on, the IELTS is a lot easier than TOEFL, TOEFL is hard? Well, the first reasons actually was mentioned earlier in this video. TOEFL is really boring, seriously, tedious and stupid. Therefore, for people to read through the whole thing is actually requires your resilience and utmost attention all the time. But in the IELTS, the reading passages, although the reading passages are longer, although the topics are more diverse. Now, for those people, those students who are already good at English. Now, remember, being good at English does not equal the amount of your vocabulary. Therefore, those students who think IELTS are easier, even though they might not have a huge vocabulary, the sentence structures, the sense for the English language must already be quite good or quite natural. Therefore, when they are reading the IELTS test, because the subjects are more interesting, they can use different paragraphs to help them, guide them to understand the entire passage, and then they get the questions right. But when they do the TOEFL, because it seems really boring, very dry, therefore, making the summary in TOEFL might not be as easy for people who are already good at English to do. So this is actually quite a misunderstanding. I personally would suggest that if your English is not good enough, is still struggling at a kind of like a beginner stage, you might as well start with TOEFL reading. Now, so this is about the comparisons of the two reading sections. In my next lesson, I'm going to talk about the listening between TOEFL and IELTS. See you in my next class. Ciao.